Hi, I am the co-founder of CrowdSurf,
director of events,
bass player,
video producer,
digital director,
songwriter,
manager of touring,
director of content and operations.
And you're listening to the Springboard
Music Podcast.
Cassie Petrey co-founded a revolutionary digital marketing and management company called CrowdSurf in 2007 with her friend Jade Driver. Since then, CrowdSurf has managed digital marketing for Britney Spears, X Factor US, Hayley Williams, Ann Wilson, Matthew West, Selena Gomez. The list could truly go on and on. Cassie has also been recognized as a Billboard and Forbes magazine 30 under 30. In this interview, we discuss topics such as imposter syndrome, going into business with a friend, and, of course, digital marketing.
First of all, I want to say that you are so accomplished, and I know you know that, and I know you're like, it's just kind of been like one foot in front of the other, but to be a Forbes and Billboard 30 under 30 honoree is just incredible. Currently living in LA, is that correct?
Yes, I am. I live in Santa Monica.
But you're from Kentucky, so that is quite a culture shift. I'd love to know kind of how you got from Kentucky to LA and all the nitty-gritty in-betweens.
Yeah, so I would say Nashville was a big part of in between Kentucky and LA. I went to school at Middle Tennessee State outside of Nashville and worked at Warner Music Nashville during my time at Middle Tennessee State, and I stayed in Nashville for several years after. And I would say LA was kind of a gradual move. I moved out to LA originally in 2012 because I got this offer to be the digital producer for X Factor season 2. And it was a really great season with like Fifth Harmony and Emblem 3. And
I watched that season. I was a huge Emblem 3 fan.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people remember that season or ended up being really attached to somebody from that season, which was really cool. I thought it was a really great group of artists. And I came out here, and this was like before Airbnb, and I rented some horrible place on Craigslist. It was awful, but it was like the only place I could find for 3 months without signing a longer lease. And once I was out here, I realized how much work there was for me out here and for the company. And so I kind of was back and forth, I would say, between 2012 to like 2015. I was sort of between Nashville and LA. And then eventually it just became more LA than Nashville. But I would say, kind of sort of a theme throughout my career is everything is always sort of gradual. Like I gradually moved out to LA. I gradually built my company. I gradually have done everything. I've never had like a big, like, I'm going to raise a lot of money and do this thing and it's going to happen in 6 months. That works for a lot of people, but that's just never been my approach. So it wasn't too big of a shift because I was kind of able to like test it out and learn it and be in between, both cities until it just made more sense to be in LA all the time.
I'm sure, in hindsight, you see the gradual process and you're like, that's just the way things happen for me. But when you're living in it and you're building a company that you really believe in, was that kind of a hard season to see it gradually grow, or were you getting enough reward along the way that it was fine? Because it sounds like you also took on other jobs being the PA at X Factor while you're building this company.
Yeah, I mean, well, I was the digital producer, so they were a client of the company, but I had to be in the production. But I would say that was actually a really good experience for me because that kind of foreshadowed how involved we have to be as digital people now. So like, I think I saw the benefit of being on the ground and being with talent, because a lot of what I was doing was showing somebody from Fifth Harmony in person, here's something you do on Twitter. Here's how you make it used to be really popular to trend like ask, hashtag ask Normani or whoever. Right. I was like, here's how you make that happen. Here's how you launch it. Here's how many tweets you need to do to get that trending, that, and I really saw, I think, the benefits of being in person with clients. So I think that experience kind of dictated how some of our services are today, at this point. And a lot in X Factor, I'm really grateful for the experience. It was a really rough experience during it. Like, it did not, I'm glad I did it, but I would say that was probably one of the darker points in terms of me, like, personally in my career, because I was living in a place that didn't feel great, and that experience would have been so much easier now with Airbnb. Uber didn't exist, so I was paying a ton of money to rent a horrible car.
Oh, wow.
And I would have been able to, like, I think, do that experience for much less money and much more comfortably now, but that technology didn't exist at that point. Those platforms didn't. So I'm grateful that they do now, because if I had to do something like that again, it would be immensely easier. So it was dark, but it was dark, but I grew a lot because it was dark, because it was hard, because it was new, and because it was uncomfortable. So I'm glad I did it, but it was challenging. It was not easy. It was not rainbows, for sure.
I feel like a lot of what you've done, just from the little that I know about you, has been challenging because it's untreaded territory. I mean, you saw the power in digital marketing and having a digital presence for artists and accounts way before it was really even discussed in labels or amongst management teams. Where do you think that foresight came from?
I think a lot of it comes from me just always, I love being a consumer, and that definitely includes being a consumer of music and being a super fan. But I like being marketed to. I like new products. I like trying new products. And I think a lot of that came from my grandfather. He was kind of like a gadgets guy. Like, he would get, like, the magazine that had, like, I remember he had, like, the water bottle that was, like, on your back, and it would, like, squirt in your mouth, and you bring it to our, like, softball games. But he was always trying, like, fun new things. And one thing that was really cool about him is that he was always, like, constantly curious, like, not in, like, because I think a lot of times people ask you questions about what you do and you feel sort of defensive and like you have to explain yourself. But he had a way of being curious and asking people about what they do, but you could tell it's because he really liked to learn and wanted to know. And I think I lived with him growing up, and I think a lot of, that came from me in terms of not being scared to try new things and being curious how things work. And social media just happened to sort of be something that has been aligned with me when I was, like, the right ages in my career. And I, was naturally sort of drawn to that because, we were one of the first houses in middle school to have the internet, because when AOL came out in middle school, I was one of the first people to have that. And I was learning how to code little websites, and I was the first of my friends to, like, learn and know how to do that kind of stuff. And I just think it's always being curious about what's ahead and thinking about my process as a consumer, and, like, really enjoying consuming products, whether it's, like, something physical or something on the internet or experience. I like what's looking, I'm not scared of the unknown. I like to critically think about the unknown and being like, do I like this or not? Would other people like it? It's really exciting.
How do you maintain that curiosity when you are viewed as, and you are, an expert in your field and in your space?
It's just there. And I think it's I think if you're passionate about something, I think that kind of, curiosity can come along with it. I think sometimes it might be a little more extreme than others in terms of being an early adopter. And I think it's a little bit of, like, my engineering. I think I naturally have an engineering sort of brain. So for example, when Instagram launches a new tool, I'm going to probably look at it and think about it, how it can be used in 6 different ways versus it's probably marketed to show to be used as one way. Like, for example, when yesterday they launched the
Yes, I saw this.
the little, like, it kind of reminded me of away messages on AOL, and I was immediately thinking about, like, 10 different ways artists could use that. Whereas versus people are probably thinking about what cool thing can I write? I'm thinking about, like, how do I use that for marketing? I like thinking about, I like looking at like a hard tool that exists and thinking about a creative way to use it that maybe other people haven't thought about yet.
This is why I love doing these interviews, because I get to talk to people who are so different than I am, because I saw that
Yeah.
little feature in my messages and I was like, this is so purposeless. What do I do with this? It just feels
Yeah.
like more places to put content and it's just like overstimulating. Whereas your brain is like, oh my gosh, we could do this. We could do this. We could do this. And you got excited about it. And that's just so inspiring.
Well, and also I think a lot of people don't think about this, but probably the place where I'm actually most active on a lot of social media platforms is in my direct messages. Like I talk to I send way more messages than I leave comments on posts. I have a lot of conversations with people. And so I spend a lot of time in that part of the app. And so that's a way to reach people like me who maybe spend more time talking to people one-on-one than they do in feed. So that was another thing that I thought was really cool about it, is it's reaching somebody in another, it's a way to market to people in a process and part of the app that a lot of people are in all the time that you haven't had before. So I thought that was really powerful.
I love that. I hadn't thought about it like that, but you're totally right. That is the main way that I use Instagram is, and even like TikTok, right? People are sending me things all the time.
Yep.
So I'm in my inbox a lot.
Like my business partner Jade sends me random content from people all the time. So I'd spend, if I broke down like where I spend my time in the app, probably most of it is there. So I was excited about that because I was like, oh, eyeballs in a new place where people might miss the feed. That like made me excited.
Well, and that's why you are the perfect person to be the founder or co-founder, which we need to talk about as well. But co-founder and the head of this incredible, not only digital marketing company, which a lot of people think, but now management as well. What is an app that you think is underutilized?
Oh, there's a lot. Definitely Snapchat, because Snapchat is interesting. It's people either like use it or they don't. And I feel like a lot of times it depends on your friend group, what part of the country you're from, what part of the world you're in. Like my family in Kentucky really uses it a lot. Like we have like a
Really?
big cousins. Yeah, we have like a big cousins group chat. And I'm not like I don't think about using it on an ongoing basis, how the way my sisters do, for example. And my mom is reminding me to check my Snapchat, but she's always like, hey, your sister sent a picture of her baby in Snapchat. Did you see it? I'm like, no, I didn't. Thanks for reminding me, because I don't have notifications on my phone. So I forget that one sometimes, but a lot of people still use it a lot. So
Wow, that's so interesting. I felt like it was a thing of the past, like thing of maybe, 8, 9 years ago. But I mean, that's so true, because if I'm around my younger cousins, they're definitely on Snapchat.
yeah, so it just depends on the group of people, and I see pretty wide age range in it, more so than usual. But a lot of Gen Z definitely using it. I work with a lovely woman named Lauren Gray. She is a Gen Z queen, but a lot of times her posts on Snapchat get more traction than her post on Instagram in terms of like stories. She'll actually get more views there, or she'll actually get more clicks from a Snapchat story than an Instagram story. So it's really powerful. And I'm always encouraging clients to use it, because I think it does more than people think.
Yeah, I think it feels more personal because it comes basically in that inbox form
Yep.
with that artist name, and it looks like it's just to you if it is, or they're like they're part of your story and they're sending you something, and it definitely feels more personal in that way.
Yeah, and it's not about I think that there's kind of something nice about there not being like a photo video feed the same way there is on Instagram.
Right.
I think that some people really like the app because they can kind of get away from that.
Yeah, it's purely an inbox like we were talking about. That's where we spend most of our time, and that's an app that devotes most of its time to an inbox. We mentioned briefly that you co-founded CrowdSurf with Jade Driver, who is incredible. I've had the honor of working with her pretty much for the last year of 2022. I'd love to know, because I think the position that you guys are in and starting a business as friends and then continuing on for 15 years is really unique. What are some, and we, you can be very, however politically you want to speak in this, but what are some do's and don'ts that you would say if two friends are like, oh my gosh, let's start this company together? What are some do's and don'ts? Because I feel like you guys have done a really good job at preserving your partnership and still building the business with the focus and the goal in mind.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think until I got a little bit older, I realized how much conflict and turmoil like bad partnerships can create. And I watched a lot of my friends go through it. And, Jada and I definitely have had arguments, and there have been times where we've been frustrated with each other. And I think at the beginning too, I was 20 when we started. So, I think at the beginning, I definitely had, to do a little bit of maturing to understand some, bigger picture things. But I think the thing that's made us do well, and I encourage anybody who's going to start a business with somebody to think about this, is our views really align like ethically and financially. And what I mean by financially is that it was always a priority for like the company to make money versus us to individually make money. And it was always important to us from like an ethics standpoint on like who we work with, when we get out of a project, what we do and don't tolerate from employees, and how to grow, how fast to grow. We've just always been on the same page about the big stuff. There's little stuff we can not agree on, but like the big stuff, finances, I think how we want to like live our lives and why we started this company, which we started this company because we liked the job that we're doing, and we both wanted freedom is what it came down to. So we were always about like freedom and integrity in terms of quality of our work over cash. And I think us being on the same page about that has been the reason why we've been able to do so well. I would say sometimes we even have to like sort of push each other to take, now that there is a little bit more money, to be able to take it sometimes. Like I remember she wanted to rent a second place in Virginia, and she's kind of felt guilty about it. And I'm like, do it, we'll be fine. Like if you take the money, like it's we have to like, and she's done the same for me before. I remember I wanted to buy my first expensive handbag, and I was like, I don't know. And she's like, do it. You've waited like 15 years. Take the bag, like literally take the bag to go get the bag. So I think us being on the same page about that and being sort of like financially conservative has, definitely been some contributing factors to why I think we've done well working with each other.
How did you know that you were the right partners for each other in this venture?
I think looking back on it now, I don't think we properly vetted that. We did not ask the right questions to each other seriously. Like we did not. I think it just happened to work out. We happened to be of like similar mindset, and I think we were both had big music industry dreams, and just felt like kind of happy to be here. Is where we were sort of at. I think if, I were to do this again or to start a new business with a new person, I would have a lot more questions to ask. I think we got lucky in terms of not having conflicting views on the things that mattered the most.
For those who don't know, I'm sure they've all heard the name CrowdSurf. Even my mom, who's 60 years old, I was like, yeah, I'm interviewing, the girl who founded or co-founded CrowdSurf. And she goes, oh, I think I know what that is. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So I'm sure everybody listening has heard of CrowdSurf. And if they don't know what it is, it's a digital marketing agency and also fairly recently an artist management firm. um, you know, CrowdSurf, and correct me if I'm wrong, does content, calendars, editing content strategy, builds email lists, runs text lists, builds websites. What types of positions are in a company like yours that people could, even maybe they've never heard that it exists, but it does?
Yeah. So the main roles at our company, because we just have so many clients in this space, are marketing roles. So there's marketing assistants, there's account managers, and then there's some senior marketing people that kind of, are mentors and oversee some bigger projects and work with the account managers. We also have some administrative assistants. We have like a management coordinator now. We have a couple people who work on the more like website tech side or the like motion graphic or graphic design side. And then we have somebody who's in charge of collecting invoices or sending invoices and collecting bills. And then we
So
have
important. That's a very important job.
Yes, it is. It makes a really big difference in your cash flow if that's done well or not. I'm very grateful for that job being done well. And then there's somebody that's in charge of HR, and they're sort of the liaison between us and our accounting team. And they turn in hours, make sure payrolls run, document days off, like all the administrative things that you would have to be done regardless of business. But those are kind of the main roles on salary at our company. And then there's a lot of different vendors that we hire for different tasks, whether it's like running ads, shooting music videos, creating content. We'll hire companies like Songfluencer to help us with influencer campaigns and everything else in between.
I know, because you just said the word influencer. I love, love, love this quote from you in the Medium article. You're probably like, oh my gosh, what did I say? Or maybe you know what I'm about to say, but I'm going to switch gears a little bit because you just said this word and I want to hear more about this. You had mentioned take the words influence and influencers out of your self-talk vocabulary. Don't ever ask yourself, how can I influence more people? But rather think, how can I help more people? When you start thinking about it from this perspective, you start having more impact on the world because you're framing it the right way. Cassie, that's so good. How have you guided your clients or your artists to shift their perspective in that way? Because I think, especially with Gen Z and the younger half of millennials, influencer is like the new dream job.
It is. Like 8-year-olds say they want to be a YouTuber or an influencer when they grow up. Which is cool. Like, I don't necessarily have a problem with the word, but I think that in order to have, it's like kind of like the title of celebrity. You become a celebrity because you did something. To become a celebrity, you don't, like, that's not the job you go after. You don't, because if you just want to be a celebrity, you just want to be famous. That's kind of like the same as being an influencer. You want engagement, you want likes. You have to have like a purpose. You need to be contributing to people, whether it's entertaining them or emotionally relating to them, or there's a lot of ways to contribute and also be an influencer. But I think you just have to know like why you're here on earth and how you're supposed to help people. And that could be with music, that could be with entertaining them, that could be a lot of different things. But I think knowing your purpose is really important, and to kind of, that's sort of your North Star and all of your content creation and your journey, and everything else can kind of follow it. And it can obviously be important to you, and obviously be it can be important. Numbers can be important, you can pay attention to them, but when you start creating for numbers versus purpose, I think that's when people get lost and the content becomes not as powerful.
That's so good. I love that. This is counter to what you just said, because you said it's more about purpose than numbers, but numbers still matter when you're, doing a digital marketing campaign or looking at, increasing social media engagement. It can be really hard from my perspective, I think, to know if you're successful, because like you said, there's Snapchat, there's TikTok, there's Instagram, there's Twitter, there's Facebook. what benchmarks or metrics do you use if somebody is like, okay, I found my purpose, I found why I'm doing this? How do I know if it's resonating with enough people? Like, how do I know if it's truly successful or mediocre, or I should just find something else?
I think if you feel like you can live your life and find something else, you should, because the music and entertainment career is, I think, for the people that have to do it and not want to do it. I think that that's always something I tell people is going to be easier and a much less stressful life if you feel like you could be happy doing something else. You should stay here if you can only be happy doing this, is what I say, because there's a lot, it's emotionally rough. There's a lot of peaks and valleys, and the valleys can be dark. And if you can do something else and be happy, you should. But in terms of numbers, I think it's always important to, like, how people always say, don't compare yourself to other people on LinkedIn or on Instagram. I think it's better to figure out a numeric way to compare yourself to yourself. It's like, look at your numbers from last month and look at your numbers from this month. And did you grow a little bit? If you grew a little bit, you're probably on the right path. But I always like to kind of compare, to what, your past performance. And sometimes, again, the peaks and valleys, like sometimes you're going to have months that are bigger than others. Like, for example, if you're on a Forbes 30 under 30 list, like as a personal person, your social media is probably going to be bigger that week you make the announcement than the next week because you had a really big moment. So you have to, like, be realistic and think about the ebbs and flows of some of those numbers. But I think something that's always great to look at, to be like, oh, okay, like a year ago I was posting this kind of content, and now I'm posting this, and I feel like the quality of my content has improved. Like, I'm proud of myself for that. I think watching your own journey is kind of a way to not get too much in your head about numbers or content and comparing yourself to, somebody else's numbers and content.
That is so wise. I hope everybody, including myself, reminds themselves of that when they start out on creating content and building a community around that content. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk briefly about your nonprofit career development program, because that is very much the heartbeat of kind of what this resource is for high school students and college students, and helping them kind of figure out if they want to be in the entertainment industry, what direction they want to be in. And so I would love to hear more about what you're doing on that end.
Yeah, so that's been an interesting journey for me, because I'm going to be honest, it did not go as well as I had hoped.
Yeah.
I think my goal was to sort of create a space where, a place where I would have liked to have been able to go when I was trying to learn more about the music business and what different people do. A lot of like what you're doing now. And so I started that with sort of the intention of having like several live Zoom meetings a month. And I realized people just don't want that anymore. I think people are sort of digital gathering out and zoomed out. And
Yeah.
so I sort of abandoned that process and just have been focusing more on like one-to-one connecting with people. Like when I go on my daily walks, if somebody's reached out to me on LinkedIn, I'll connect with them and talk to them. I just kind of moved more to one-to-one mentorship, because I think the purpose of the program was good, but the way that it was structured just wasn't working. And again, this is me like testing things and reading the room, and that format wasn't working. So I was like, okay, I'll just, instead I've been doing more podcasts like this. I've been posting more content, and I've been connecting with people in DMs on the phone or that sort of thing instead, because I always want to contribute to that mission of, giving people advice, mentorship, having giving a place for people to ask questions that they may not, know the answer to, because they don't have a connection within the music business. So I think this podcast is great for that reason, because I really believe in that and know that I would have appreciated that when I was sort of figuring out my way into this. And what jobs exist and which ones don't. But that particular format just didn't really work out. I'm okay with it, and I'm okay with telling people that, because that's a part of marketing. You try things and sometimes they don't work. So
Well, and
that's where I'm at with that now.
that's risk taking, and that's bravery, and that's courage. And you had all of those tools to try it, to step into something that doesn't really exist and see if it worked. And your confidence and humility in saying, hey, I tried it and it didn't work, and so I pivoted and I found something that does, is equally inspiring. That's incredible. If only we all could be as forthcoming with our you know deterred successes, or our just things that don't come to a fruition in the way we think. I think that takes a lot of bravery and opens a lot of doors for people to say, hey, me too. I'm so glad I'm not alone in taking a risk.
Yeah, I there's a lot of stuff that hasn't worked out, but but sometimes it does, so it's worth to keep trying. And I connected with some really great people. I think I ended up hiring some people that were in that program, or that's my initial point of meeting them. So it was worth the time, and I learned a lot. But I learned that I don't think people want to do like big Zoom chats anymore. So that's good information to know.
But think about, like, you started CrowdSurf when you were 20. Had you not taken the risk when you were 20 to start CrowdSurf in a space that was really not really on the forefront of anybody's mind, you really had to do a lot of educating. Had you not been the one to step into that arena, you would have missed out on so much. And so it's always worth taking that risk so that you don't miss out again if it does come to fruition.
Yeah, I like trying. I like trying things nobody's done before, and there could be a lot of reward in that. So I hope that I keep doing it.
Yeah, I'm sure you will, especially with the Instagram little away messages in the inbox.
I'm ready. I'm ready to see what people do with it.
Final question, and I wrap up all of my interviews with this question. Do you believe that you're living the dream?
That's tough, because I feel like you never feel like you're living the dream. I feel like imposter syndrome is very real, and but I have a different, I think, sort of relationship to imposter syndrome than most people, because when I hear most people talk about it, they say they are trying to shake it. And I'm not saying that imposter syndrome should take over your life to the point where you have like zero confidence and it's debilitating, but it exists because we need humility. We need to like, we need a little bit of emotion to kind of knock us down, to show that something's important to us. If people don't have any level of imposter syndrome, like, I feel like that's kind of scary. Like, that's where you get like crazy narcissists and people who maybe should have a little more imposter
That's so
syndrome,
good.
in my
Yeah.
opinion. I think, everything's a balance in life, but I think to a certain extent, a little dose of that is good. But yeah, there are moments where like, I think the moments, I feel like a lot of times I don't feel like I'm living the dream in the moment, but then when I call somebody to rehash something that happened, I was like, oh my God, I never would have believed that this would be a reality for me. So I think a lot of times you kind of look back on it and realize you're living the dream, but you're so focused and pumped with adrenaline in certain moments. And sometimes it's hard to step back at that moment and realize that that's what's happening to you at that time.
I feel like imposter syndrome is the adult version of stage fright. It's
A
like,
little bit.
a little stage fright is good for you. A little imposter syndrome is good for you. It's going to humble you, it's going to push you, it's going to challenge you, it's going to grow you. And I can absolutely resonate to your statement of, it feels like you're just consistently going, and it takes intentional reflection to realize, oh my gosh, this is where I dreamed of being.
Yeah, totally. I remember I called my mom and I was telling her about this Backstreet Boys event I went to, and I'm like, yeah, and I had to, put Howie in my Uber and help him get home because his car didn't come. And she's like, you never would have thought that would have happened. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. I just was making sure my artists got to their hotel safely without getting harassed by people. But you're right. Like, that's a good story and that's fun. And I'm grateful that it happen and I get to work with my childhood heroes.
Thanks for listening to the Springboard Music Podcast. If there's something that resonated with you in this episode or an episode that you would like for us to create in the future, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at Springboard Music on Instagram.